The first sign that Aniah Blanchard was going to die wasn't a scream, or a gunshot, or a frantic 911 call. It was a text message. At 11:43 p.m. on October 23, 2019, Aniah's roommate, Sarah, looked down at her phone and saw a notification that made no sense. The message read, "I'm smoking a blunt. LOL." To anyone else, this would look like a mundane update from a college student enjoying a Wednesday night. But to Sarah, it was a glaring red flag that sent a cold spike of adrenaline through her chest. Aniah didn't smoke. She rarely drank. She was a disciplined 19-year-old with a strict routine, and she certainly didn't use that kind of loose, casual language. Sarah immediately typed back, asking the question that would hang over the next month of agonizing searching. "Who are you with?" The reply came seconds later. "Eric. I just met him." Sarah frowned. There was no Eric in their circle. She typed again, "Who is Eric? Where are you?" But this time, the bubbles didn't appear. The screen remained static. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. That text message was the last communication Aniah Blanchard would ever send to the world. To understand why that silence was so deafening, you have to understand the girl who went silent. Aniah Blanchard was not reckless. She was the beloved stepdaughter of UFC heavyweight Walt Harris, a man who made his living in the cage, but whose heart was entirely wrapped around his family. On that Wednesday, Aniah had driven nearly 4 hours to northern Alabama to attend a funeral for a family friend. It was a heavy day, filled with grief and goodbyes, but Aniah remained a pillar of support for her family. Her mother, Angela, remembers kissing her on the cheek and telling her she loved her before Aniah got back in her car to drive the long stretch back to Auburn. She was tired. Walt Harris, who was deep in training for a fight that could define his career, hugged her tight. He later admitted that he almost asked her to stay the night, sensing her fatigue, but Aniah was responsible. She had work the next morning. She had classes. She needed to get back. That decision to drive home, a decision made out of responsibility and dedication, would place her on a collision course with a kind of evil that most of us pretend only exists in movies. The timeline of that night is a series of mundane moments that become horrifying in retrospect. Aniah arrived in Auburn around 11 p.m. She stopped at her brother Elijah's apartment to drop him off. They were close, the kind of siblings who tracked each other's locations and checked in constantly. Elijah told her to be safe. At 11:09 p.m., she texted her roommate that she was almost home. She was 3 miles away. 3 miles. In a car, that is 5 minutes. She should have been walking through her front door by 11:15. Instead, at 11:21 p.m., Aniah made a fateful decision to stop at a Chevron gas station on South College Street. She wanted a late-night snack, a bag of sour cream and onion chips, and a drink. Security footage shows her walking into the store, looking calm, wearing a black dress and comfortable shoes. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She wasn't afraid. She had no reason to be. But the cameras captured something else, too. Standing inside that same convenience store, lingering near the counter, was a man who watched her every move. His name was Ibrahim Yazid. And the moment their paths crossed under the fluorescent hum of those gas station lights, the clock on Aniah's life began to count down. When Aniah didn't come home that night, the panic didn't set in immediately. It crept in slowly, then all at once. The next morning, October 24th, Angela Harris called her daughter for their daily FaceTime ritual. The phone rang and rang, echoing into the void. This was the first anomaly. Aniah never ignored her mother. Then, her workplace called. Aniah, who was known for her punctuality and dedication, hadn't shown up for her shift. That was the breaking point. Elijah, her brother, went to her apartment and found her room empty, her bed slept in by no one. The panic that had been a whisper became a scream. Walt and Angela raced to Auburn, tearing down the highway with their hearts in their throats. They arrived to find a scene that offered no answers, only questions. Her dog, Blue, was there, but Aniah was gone. The police were notified, missing person posters were printed, and the face of the beautiful 19-year-old with the bright smile began to circulate on social media. But while the family prayed for a misunderstanding, the physical evidence was telling a darker story 55 miles away. 2 days after she vanished, on October 25th, police received a call about a suspicious vehicle abandoned at an apartment complex in Montgomery. It was a black Honda CR-V. It was Aniah's car. But it wasn't just parked, it was a crime scene. The vehicle had sustained fresh damage, scrapes and dents along the passenger side that suggested a violent struggle had occurred while the car was in motion. It looked like the car had been used as a weapon, or perhaps a cage. When investigators opened the doors, the hope that Aniah was simply missing evaporated. The interior was a horror show. The front passenger seat was soaked in blood, so much blood that forensic experts would later testify it was indicative of a life-threatening injury. There was a bullet hole in the door. The evidence was screaming that a violent, catastrophic event had taken place inside that small metal box. The girl who loved sour cream and onion chips hadn't just been taken, she had been brutalized. I want you to pause for a second and imagine the terror of those final moments in the car. We often consume true crime as entertainment, but this is reality. A young woman, alone, fighting for her life against an armed predator in the passenger seat of her own vehicle. The damage to the car tells us she didn't surrender. She fought. She tried to crash the car. She tried to escape. And this brings us to a question we all need to ask ourselves. If you were in that situation, would you know what to do? It's a terrifying thought, but engaging with these stories is how we learn, how we stay vigilant. Before we go deeper into the investigation, I want to hear from you. Do you think the justice system is too lenient on violent offenders who are awaiting trial? We're about to reveal something about the suspect that will make your blood boil. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Back at the car, the forensics team was building a profile of the attacker. They found DNA. They found fingerprints. And most crucially, they found a connection to the Chevron station footage. The timeline was becoming clear. Aniah had entered the store at 11:21 p.m. The suspect was there. He followed her out. A witness, whose identity was protected for their safety, came forward with a chilling account. They had seen a man forcing a woman into her car against her will. He shoved her into the driver's seat, then climbed in over her. The car sped off. It was a kidnapping in plain sight, over in seconds. The police now had a face from the CCTV footage, a man in a camouflage hoodie. They blasted his image across the news, labeling him a person of interest. But when the public learned who he was, the sadness turned into a blinding, white-hot rage. His name was Ibrahim Yazid. He was 30 years old, and he was a monster who had been hiding in plain sight. As investigators dug into his background, they found a rap sheet that read like a career criminal's resume. But the most shocking revelation wasn't what he had done in the distant past. It was what he had done just months before meeting Aniah. In February 2019, Yazid had been arrested for a savage crime. He was accused of kidnapping a 77-year-old man, beating him until he was unconscious and near death, and robbing him. It was a crime of extreme violence, targeting the most vulnerable member of society. Yazid was charged with kidnapping and attempted murder. In a functioning justice system, a man facing those charges would be behind bars, awaiting trial, unable to hurt anyone else. But Ibrahim Yazid wasn't behind bars. He was free. Despite the severity of his crimes, despite the fact that he was a clear danger to the community, a judge had granted him bond. He was released on a $295,000 bond, free to walk the streets while his case wound its way through the slow-moving courts. He was supposed to be monitored. He was supposed to be keeping his nose clean. Instead, he was in Auburn, staying in a hotel, prowling gas stations at midnight. The failure here is monumental. The system that was designed to protect citizens like Aniah Blanchard had actively facilitated her murder by releasing a predator back into the wild. When the police finally identified him as the man in the Chevron footage, he was already on the run. He knew what he had done. He knew the walls were closing in. And he knew that this time, there would be no bond. The manhunt for Ibrahim Yazid was intense. The U.S. Marshals, the FBI, and local police coordinated a massive dragnet. They tracked him across state lines into Florida. On November 7, 2019, huddled in the brush near an exit on Interstate 10 in Pensacola, authorities found him. He tried to hide, but there was nowhere left to run. He was arrested and brought back to Alabama in handcuffs. When he appeared in court, he had a swollen eye and a defiant attitude. He smirked at the cameras. He shook his head when the charges were read. He looked Aniah's grieving father, Walt, in the eye and showed absolutely zero remorse. He even had the audacity to tell the judge, "Y'all ain't got no video, no audio of me shooting nobody." He thought he was smarter than the police. He thought that because they hadn't found Aniah's body, he could beat the case. He was wrong. But while Yazid sat in a cell, playing games with the legal system, Aniah's family was living in a special kind of hell. They knew their daughter was hurt. They knew she had lost a lot of blood. But they didn't know where she was. Was she lying in a ditch somewhere, cold and alone? Was she still alive, held captive? Walt Harris stopped training. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. He spent his days searching the woods, calling out her name, hoping against hope for a miracle. The community rallied around them, tying blue ribbons to trees and organizing search parties that combed through miles of dense Alabama undergrowth. But the woods are deep, and they are full of secrets. It would take a traitor to reveal where the bodies were buried. November dragged on. The leaves began to turn, marking the passage of time that the Harris family didn't have. Investigators knew Yazid hadn't acted alone, at least not in the aftermath. They turned their attention to his associates, squeezing them for information. And then, a crack in the wall of silence appeared. A man named Antoine Fisher, an acquaintance of Yazid, was brought in for questioning. Fisher had a history himself, having served time for a murder committed years ago. Facing charges of hindering prosecution and desperate to save his own skin, Fisher started talking. He told detectives a story that chilled them to the bone. He said that in the early morning hours of October 24th, Yazid had shown up at a house in Montgomery driving Aniah's black Honda. Yazid needed a ride. Fisher followed him. Fisher led investigators to a remote, wooded area in Macon County, off County Road 2. It was a desolate place, the kind of place you only go if you don't want to be seen. He described how Yazid had walked into the woods carrying something wrapped in a comforter. Fisher said he saw extremities, arms or legs, dangling from the bundle. When Yazid returned to the truck, he was empty-handed. According to Fisher, Yazid confessed right there in the cab of the truck, saying the girl went for the gun and he had to shoot her. It was a self-serving lie from a killer trying to justify a murder, but it gave the police the map they needed. On November 25th, over a month after Aniah disappeared, investigators descended on the woods in Macon County. The search was methodical and grim. And then, they found it. Lying on the forest floor, half buried in the leaves, was a boot. It was a sorrel riding boot. District Attorney Brandon Hughes took a photo of it and texted it to Walt Harris. He had to be sure. Walt looked at the photo and his world collapsed. He recognized it instantly. He had bought those boots for Aniah during a family trip to New York City. They were her favorites. The discovery of the boot was the confirmation that Aniah was there and that she wasn't coming home. Moments later, investigators found skeletal remains scattered nearby. The medical examiner would later confirm a gunshot wound to the skull. The month of hope was over. The season of mourning had begun. The funeral for Aniah Blanchard was a testament to the life she lived, not the way she died. Thousands of people packed the church. Her friends spoke of her kindness, her goofiness, her ability to light up a room. They spoke of a girl who wanted to work in mental health, who wanted to help people. Walt Harris, the toughest man in the room, stood before the congregation broken but unbowed. He spoke of his love for the daughter he didn't share blood with, but shared a soul with. But as the flowers wilted and the news cameras moved on, the Harris family made a decision. They would not let Aniah be just another statistic. They would not let her death be in vain. They turned their grief into a weapon against the system that had failed them. Angela Harris became a force of nature. She realized that the judge who released Yazid had been following the law as it was written at the time, a law that made it difficult to deny bond even for violent offenders. She set out to change the Constitution of Alabama. She campaigned tirelessly for Aniah's law, a measure that would give judges the discretion to deny bail to anyone charged with serious violent felonies like murder, kidnapping, and rape. It was a fight against bureaucracy, against inertia, against the slow gears of government. But Angela wouldn't take no for an answer. In November 2022, the voters of Alabama went to the polls. Aniah's law passed with overwhelming support. Because of Aniah Blanchard, violent predators in Alabama can no longer buy their freedom while awaiting trial. Because of Aniah, other families might never have to receive that text message. "I'm smoking a blunt. LOL." Aniah Blanchard's life was short, but her legacy is long. She saved lives she will never know. She protected families she will never meet. But that doesn't bring her back. It doesn't fill the empty seat at the dinner table or answer the text messages that still sit unread on her friends' phones. Her story is a reminder that the systems we trust are fragile, and sometimes they break. It's up to us to demand they be fixed before another name is added to the list. If you believe that victims' rights should always come before the rights of violent criminals, please hit that subscribe button and share this video. The more people who know Aniah's story, the louder the demand for justice becomes. We cover the stories that need to be told, and we can't do it without you. Rest in peace, Aniah.